Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm your host, Liz Hyman, bringing the rescue boat to your sales challenges. In this ever-changing sales environment, it's easy for leaders to feel adrift. We're here to be the beacon guiding you to success. Each episode, I'm joined by top sales experts and practitioners who have navigated this waters and come out victorious. Together, we'll uncover the insights and strategies that will help you hit your sales targets and grow your business. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Hi, welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Bryn Tillman, Mike Simmons, John Way, Chris Bowen, and Renee Bigelow. And Renee, thanks for joining us in the midst of a hurricane or post-hurricane.
Aftermath.
I'm over here in fire zones, so we've got disaster zones all around us. Today we're going to talk, in this episode, we're going to talk about communication. We've been talking about value, but you can't bring value if you can't communicate. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about how do you communicate with your customers, with your prospects? We may even want to talk about how do you start communication with somebody who you don't know yet, but let's start there. Mike, you asked us to start to talk about communication, so I'm going to start with you.
So a friend of mine, his name's Jody Mayberry, and he helped with some of the podcast stuff early days. Said the biggest mistake in communication is believing that it happened. One of the things I like to remind people about is there are things that are said, and we can watch the tape. We can watch the recording. There used to be this thing called tape where stuff was recorded on, but we could watch the recording and listen and see and hear all of the things that were said. Well, so there are things that are said, there are things that are heard, and there are things that are remembered. And very rarely are all three of those the same, especially when you bring multiple people in and people get distracted by things like, I don't know where here it is, like their phone, and they start scrolling and doing other things. We lose people. There's a lot of stuff that's out there. So I think the first piece, when it comes to communication, one of the things I like to test and validate, trust but verify, is that the communication took place. What was heard? What's remembered? What was their understanding?
And how often does somebody think they communicated something that somebody else understood as something completely different?
It never happens in my household. I mean, Jen and I communicate better than anybody else. I'm sure. I mean, and the dogs always listen to me when I say things like sit and stay and all of that other kind of stuff. Communication always happens.
Okay, Chris.
Well, they probably understand a lot more English than you do dog.
This is also true.
I will share a little tidbit on making sure that communication is absorbed and remembered. I have a golden messaging rule, which is essentially you need to say things in any situation. It's for communicating and messaging. In any situation, you need to say things 8 to 10 times minimum, and you need to do it over 3 to 5 different formats. So in person, in email, in a presentation, like you have to do this multiple times, and it needs to have consistency. You're basically using some psychology. You need something called repetition priming. You need to prime for people to remember, and eventually it will cut through all that clutter. So if you just do that 8 to 10 over 3 to 5, I love your example, Mike, of confirmation, right? Like this is what was covered. This is what we agreed. Do we all agree? This is what we agreed. But you also have to do that repetition for it to really sink in and for people to understand.
So I'd like to add, one of the best things you can do is ask your client how they like to communicate. I have a client that I text with. He's like, hey, do you have an hour this week? It's in a text. That's how John and I chat, right? I have clients where they're email only. I have clients that they want to just schedule a call whenever they have a question. I have clients that will hop into our community and our free library and mention me. And then, of course, I have folks that are connecting and engaging on LinkedIn. But I think the key is when you start to communicate with your client, ask them how they like to communicate. What is their favorite form of communication? Because I agree we might be saying things that without clarity or consistency, but at least we're in the right channel. we're starting there.
I think that channel is important, and understanding communication styles. As salespeople and as founders, we get really excited and we talk, and somebody says something, and you can see us sitting here in this room ready to speak before the next person has even finished talking. I have a client who will literally take 30-second breaks in between what she's saying. And when we first started talking, I used to think something was wrong every time she did that. I've been working with her over a year now, and I finally have learned to just shut up and listen and wait. Don't ask her if everything's okay. Don't jump in and say something. I just have to shut up, wait for her to say what it is she needs to say because she's thinking about it. But all of our buyers are not like us. So we don't give them a chance. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I love it. And I didn't give you a chance to finish. So I just wanted to, but this whole idea of 30 seconds is really powerful because there's that opportunity to put together thought before you start sharing. And there's that space that you want to create because we get super excited. Like we hear something, even on these calls, and Liz is really good at watching the nonverbal. I have different tics that indicate that I've got something to share, whether it's, Liz can describe those in a separate conversation. But there's
John has a give. He puts his hand up to his chin. That's how I know John's ready to talk.
If you send me an email, I won't see it. And there are a lot of people that know this. So they know that they need to send me a text message that says, hey, heads up, I made an introduction to you via email. Email is where stuff goes to die. I've got, however many thousands of emails. I don't believe in inbox zero, primarily because Google search works really well in email. So it's a great place to document stuff and have it persist for a while. But this is a communication style and a communication preference that I have. Now, there are some people who have to communicate via email, and then I have to adjust on my end, but it might slow things down. So understanding that, empathizing with someone around how they prefer to communicate and what their style is, or what their style is really good. I also tend to be a bit direct in written language and a little wordy in non-written language, unless I'm in a high stress mode. If I'm in a high stress mode and we are just moving things forward and we're getting things done and we've known each other for a while, I will be direct to the point and I will probably irritate you and you may never want to talk with me again.
And what Mike was really telling us is that he doesn't answer email when he's on the golf course.
I do not. Literally text message is the best way to get a hold of me. And if you don't know what my cell phone is to text me, then we probably haven't figured out that we're the right fit. That it's out there. Like there's so many different ways to get it. So email, and unfortunately, or actually fortunately, I'm doing better at not bringing my phone onto the golf course except to capture pictures. I just erased my whiteboard. Would it be helpful to share a model?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens with this whole communication.
Okay, wait, hang on a second though. As we're speaking about communicating, some of you are listening and there's no video. So for those of you who are not seeing the video, Mike's going to explain what he's drawing.
I am. And what I want you to do, if you're not watching the video and you're listening to this, whether you're working out or you're in the car or whatever, think about a square. Everything that we're going to talk about is going to work. We're going to work around a square as a tool. And at the top of the square, just write who. The top of the square, write who. Who is part of the communication? Who's in the room? Who am I communicating with? It might be multiple people. It might be one person. On the right-hand side of the square, I want you to write down TO. TO stands for their objectives. Let's anticipate Let's anticipate their objectives. What are they looking to accomplish? What are their goals? What are they trying to do? What do they want to get out of this conversation, this communication that's happening? On the other side, I want you to write our objectives. Left-hand side. So on the right-hand side, we have TO, their objectives. We're anticipating something. On the left-hand side, our objectives. What do we want to get out? What do we want to learn? What do we want to share? What do we want to confirm? What do we want to validate? And then at the bottom of the square, right, next steps. These are your desired next steps. What's the thing that you expect people to do as a result? What are the actions that people should do as a result of that communication? If you know those 4 things, you will help de-risk the communication that is going to take place and help increase the likelihood that you'll get to the place that you want to go. And if you happen to not get to the place that you want to go, it's either because you didn't anticipate their objectives properly, you didn't know what your objectives are, somebody new came into the conversation, you didn't know who the who was, or you weren't clear around what your desired next steps are. If you can't answer any of those questions, make one of those lines in that square dotted line. That shape can now no longer hold water. You've taken on risk. And you might be okay with the idea of taking on that risk, but at least at that point in time, you can make a decision. Do I move forward with that risk or do I decide to stop things? Take a little bit of time, put together a plan. And that's a call planning framework that applies in communication, in any communication. It works in emails, it works in newsletters, it works in meetings, it works at events.
I like that. And I think that it's the who part, I think, is really important when you're thinking, all of them are important, but when you're thinking about sales timeline and especially in a complex selling environment where you have to know who all of the people are. And we forget that there's people who we are not gathering information from and their input is impacting outcomes, but we haven't taken the time to figure out who they are and what matters to them. So I think that's powerful. Can we jump to another subject for a second in this topic of communication? And that is communicating with someone who is, and this is my favorite new word, somebody who's ghosting you. I don't believe people actually ghost you. I think they either just don't want to talk to you or they get busy, and ghosting is it's us being nervous, so we call it ghosting. But, and it's very, that's what the word we use, but truthfully, people don't ghost you. They just get busy. Mike is the millennial who's going to share it, help us understand this. Okay. So, what do we say to somebody who's either ghosting us? How do we communicate to somebody in a way that they will hear if they're ghosting us, or if we've never talked to them again? I think right now, one of the biggest things, or I've never talked to them before, one of the biggest things we're struggling with is in a very, very noisy world. How do I communicate with someone new so that they can hear me and are interested in hearing me? And if you guys haven't heard me say this before, in the last 4 months, every month I've gotten over 4,000 emails. Guess how many emails I read from people I don't know? I can't even find the emails from the people who need me. So how in this really noisy world, how do we communicate?
So
Turn it out there.
So I'll go out. I'll just tie this back to that same messaging golden rule. This is where that frequency helps. This is where those different formats help. But how you do it is important. Otherwise, you're just slamming someone with the same thing over and over again, right?
You mean like, did you read my last message? I'm moving this to the top of your inbox. I'm going to say this one more time. Did you see my email below? It's just below this one. Did you see it yet? Do you mean like that?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's not how to do it. But what you want to do is connect it back to what matters to the person, right? So I'll go back to some of the examples we shared in one of our prior podcasts on triggers, right? Oh, hey, Liz, congratulations. I saw you just acquired a new organization, right? Like, I'm now congratulating you. Your ego takes over, right? Like, these are simple psychology principles, right? Like, someone sending you a congratulations note. If I knew that you haven't read my last 3 emails, if I can see that they've never been opened, then maybe I want to send it to you on LinkedIn. responding to your announcement, right? Like trying to just get through in some way and about a topic that is important to you, right? Like those all count as some of your touches and ways that you can get across.
Bryn, you're really good at this. Help us out here. How do we talk to people who don't know they want to talk to us, or we don't know yet?
Yeah. So I think we have to start with understanding what they need before they're thinking about our solution. So what's going on in their world before they know they need us? Because that's where we want to grab them, right? So what challenges are they facing? What are they Googling? What are they looking for? But if we are only looking for people that know they need us, we're very late in the buyer's journey. Right. So it's really important that what we're putting out there goes back to what is valuable to them early on. So for what I do, which is, scaling social selling programs inside of enterprise companies. How did that come across as brand new? Okay. But that's what I do. Right. So rolling out successful social selling programs inside of organizations, if I start my messaging around, you need a formal, so scalable social selling program, so here's some information, it's too late. They're way far down in the rabbit hole. But what if the problem is, man, our pipeline is shrinking? Holy cow, first conversations, our sales reps are not having any. Boy, we're not getting a whole lot of client referrals. How do we fix that? Those are the things that are happening before they even know that LinkedIn should be a solution. So what I implore people to do, how do you start the conversation with someone that needs you? Figure out what they need way before they need you. Then you are the one who is influencing the way they think about that solution. And many times they don't even shop you, right? You are the one that has helped them along the way. And then the call to action is, hey, I see where you are. I've got some ideas and insights for you. If you're interested, I'm happy to throw some ideas your way. It's not exactly what I do, but I work with lots of people that are in this area, and I've talked with a lot of people that have failed and succeeded, and I can kind of maybe even help you get there. And we're not solving that immediate problem, but we are now positioned that when they've worked through that piece, that we are one of the solutions they bring in. And really, one of the statistics, I think it's Corporate Visions, 74% of buyers choose the company or sales rep that was first to add value and insight. So we've got to get in there early.
So hang on just a second, you guys. I want to go back to what we were talking about last episode, which is your customer's problem in their words. Bryn just did that for us, right? The CEO or the head of sales or somebody saying our pipeline there's nothing new in there, right? Or we're not having first meetings. That's the language they're using in their own world when they're talking about problems. They're not going, we really need a LinkedIn solution that's going to elevate our, right? People don't think about problems that way. They think about them with, they're frustrated and they're looking at it and they're worrying about it. It's not a problem if they're not thinking about it, worrying about it, and talking about it in their terms with their people. It's not a problem otherwise. If they're looking at a value solution that's going to, so what? John, you got something for me?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think you just have to be creative. One of the things, because we talked about, emails being ghosted or maybe LinkedIn being ghosted, but, it never hurts to make a phone call. Some people actually send out like a letter or something like that. And sometimes, if none of that works or something like that, you could potentially call on a referral partner or an advisor or speak at an event that the decision maker likes to go to or something like that. But you just have to be creative. But I think a lot of times we get stuck on, well, I'm comfortable over email, and so that's what I'm going to use. And I think one of the topics, the themes that we've been talking about through the last previous episodes is, no, you have to adapt to what your customer prefers. And I think Bryn, you said it the best. You have to understand their communication style. And what if they're like Mike? Mike ghosted you. Well, that's because Mike doesn't read emails. You have to show up at the golf course.
I got a phone call yesterday from somebody who said, Liz, I sent you 3 emails and you didn't respond to me. And I never got one of her emails. I looked, and then I finally found them in my junk folder. I'm like, I was not ghosting you. I absolutely would have written back to you or called you if I had gotten it, but I did not.
Liz, I'll add a little more context to this, making sure you're known. One of the things from a marketing perspective that is our job to do for marketing is to make sure our brand is known earlier and earlier in the buyer's journey, right? In that buyer's pyramid, right? The earlier that you know my brand, the more likely that there's a recall when you understand you have that problem that you're going to go to it. That is equally important for a person. So from the marketing perspective, it's the brand. But from a sales perspective, a relationship perspective, you want the person to know the person they're going to call on well before they need to call on them too, right? Because the earlier they know and trust that person, as a human, as a good human, or have a relationship, the more likely they are to be like, oh, I know someone who does this, right? So you have one of my clients, I'll say one of the big things that we came up with that really helped is backing this relationship up with the brand, like who we were targeting and the group we were targeting from the brand, is having the founder create like a target 100 list and connect with as many of those people well before a launch, right? So that founder can be known. Because if you're known, just like you said, you don't open those emails from people you don't know. So how do you get known? You start interacting. I'll tell you an old PR play that works still to this day. Reporters are just like leads, right? Like you're trying to pitch something to them. You go follow the reporter on Twitter. You engage with their things. You like, you comment, you do whatever. Like you become known to them before you pitch something to them, so that they're like, oh, I recognize that name. I've seen it 10, 20, 30 times, right? Like, because you've liked on a lot of their tweets or you liked on a lot of their things, right? Your name is familiar to them. I think that's a big piece that gets missed. People think that marketing has to do this whole side for the brand to be known, which is true. But if you also have the person known, it's like a double whammy.
It's like it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Yeah, but I think this is also ties into this idea of getting referrals, right? In this very, very noisy world, if I don't have credibility by myself, I need to borrow credibility from somebody that does have credibility with the person I'm talking to. And I have to tell you guys, I'm sitting here doing my C's, right? We've talked about curiosity. We've talked about creativity. We've talked about communication. We've implied compassion, although we haven't really said it when we started talking about emotions. And now we're talking about credibility, which is one of my favorite C's. So, if we don't have credibility, if I don't know who you are and you're trying to talk to me, somehow you're going to have to earn credibility, and we can earn it by leveraging our relationships. We can earn it by I do this for Coca-Cola. I can do it for you too. Might be a way to earn credibility. But in all this noise, somehow you have to be credible enough for somebody to listen to you. Go ahead, Bren.
So, we talk a lot about earning the right to get the conversation, right? So how do we do that? And Keenan, that wrote Gap Selling, talks about mastering the ask-offer ratio, which I love. And I'm going to adapt it to my words now, but it's his concept, which is I am going to offer you something in exchange for your time. You are buying my content, whatever that is, whether it's an email, a blog post, a video. I'm selling you my content in exchange for your time. So if you think about this, right, that is the one resource you can never get back. And so you've got to master it. And that's how you start to earn the right to get the conversation. So this is the biggest fail is I click through and I think I'm going to learn something and it's a pitch, right? So that's a bait and switch. The next one is where almost everyone fails, but no one knows it, which is neutral, right? It doesn't create a compelling moment. It doesn't hurt you, but it doesn't help move the dial forward. It doesn't help you earn the right to get that conversation. When you have mastered the ask offer ratio, at the end of them, of consuming your content, they're like, man, that was a great use of my time. And when they say that, they're willing to take your call because they believe that even more time will be well spent. And so much of earning that credibility comes in with that first engagement with you. Is this of value? And when you can continue to bring value in every point, they go, man, I got an ROI on my time. Then they'll book time with you. So,
John, what you got?
I was going to say, to add on to what Bren just said and Renee said, and your topic of credibility, like one of the things that I think people make a big mistake on with referrals is all they care about is get me the meeting. That's all they care about. Just get me the meeting. And for me, again, the School of Hard Knocks, I've learned there is a huge difference between somebody meeting with me because, let's say, Liz called in a favor versus them meeting with me and Liz told them, John knows the answer to your problem. That is a world of difference. And if we all know what the outcome of calling in a favor is going to be, right? We meet for coffee and that's pretty much it. So how do you get the second kind? And that to me is again, School of Hard Knocks of learning all the things that Renee just talked about. Like you have to show up in places to where people can say, well, don't take my word for it. Look at what he wrote. Look at the podcast that he was on. Look at, these other things. And that that gives you that credibility as well, as opposed to, well, just go meet with John because he's a nice guy. That's not going to go anywhere. That again, School of Hard Knocks took me a lot of time to learn that, but that was a big lesson.
So when I was in Hawaii, one of the things in a very small town in Hawaii, in Kona, if you've never been there, people would walk into my office and say, so-and-so told me that I should come see you, that you could help me. Like, okay, let's figure out what your problem is. They would come on with the most, but they were sure I was going to help them because somebody told them. And that's really where we want to be. Either somebody saying, hey, John can help you. John's program is what you need to be using. Or them reading what we're writing or hearing what we're saying and going, I believe you can help me.
Exactly.
Okay. Any final words on, I think we started this one on communication. Any final words? Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
I'll just add to just another layer of understanding of the psychology behind, and Bren uses ask offer. My word is give get, like give before you get, right? But essentially the psychology at play there is reciprocity, right? Like I've given you like, sure, it's the exchange of time and I got value, right? Like, but once there's value, there's sort of an obligation, an inherent obligation that we as humans sociologically and psychologically feel. This person gave us value. I need to do something to return that favor, right? So the referral is leaning a lot on that. The giving something, sharing industry news. If you know you have a CEO that's super busy and something big has happened and they should see it, like making sure you're the person that's sharing that, giving them giving them a tip into a place to solve a problem that has nothing to do with you. I think Bren used that example, right? Those are ways where you're giving value that are going to lead to some form of wanting to return value, that reciprocity. And that's where you can kind of start to go into talking about your solution or building a relationship where they come to you for something.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us, your Sales SOS podcast crew. And as we talked about communication, join us in our next episode.
And that's a wrap of this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope today's episode has equipped you to navigate the sales seas with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to the Sales SOS podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday, or share your questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. Until next time, keep sailing towards those sales goals. I'm Liz Hyman, your captain here at the Sales SOS podcast, saying smooth sailing and successful selling.